Great news. I'm going to continue my streak of posting absolute banger videos about the most viral topical debates by today discussing whether or not a book published nearly 30 years ago was right. Put on your flame-resistant suit and get ready for the hottest of hot takes. Jared Diamond's Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, published in 1997, was wrong and dumb. Boom. Just a pause here. Give you a minute to pick your monocle up off the floor. Jared Diamond, in case you didn't know, is a scientist, a historian, a polymath, the smartest guy in the room. He's written several popular science books, with the most famous, most celebrated probably being Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Fates of Human Societies. That book contains a lot of assertions, with the main thrust being that the reason Eurasian people conquered and displaced people on other continents is largely the result of a geographical advantage. Eurasia is oriented primarily on an east-west axis, which allowed a cultural exchange to happen along a line that was more homogeneous in terms of climate and day-night cycle and wildlife, plants and animals that could be easily domesticated. Meanwhile, the Americas and Africa are situated along a primarily north-south axis, which does not allow any of those advantages, according to Diamond. This book blew our collective mind. And I'm including myself in that. You know, I read it off of a boyfriend's shelf in my early 20s, and I was really impressed. That book was on every boyfriend's bookshelf. It sold millions of copies. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It even got a television documentary series starring Diamond in 2005. You don't get that kind of popularity without some pushback. And boy, was there a lot of it from different directions. First, I will mention the racism angle. Diamond went way out of his way to point out that his hypothesis was explicitly anti-racist. He argued that white societies did not end up dominating because they were genetically superior to other races and other societies, but because of a bit of geographical luck. But a lot of people pointed out that while explicitly racist people might not support that hypothesis, implicitly racist people would love it. Because instead of grappling with the idea that white people became culturally dominant due to brutality and the exploitation of others, we can just throw our hands in the air and say, well, it couldn't be helped, could it? This is just how things were always going to be. Blame continental drift. For this reason, there was a lot of hemming and hawing back in the day over whether liking the book meant you were racist or not racist. White supremacists hated the book, but so did many anti-racist progressives. Moderates loved it, though, so, that's why it was extremely popular. I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing this argument because while it is worth interrogating how certain nefarious groups will use and abuse certain hypotheses, today I just want to talk about whether or not that hypothesis is correct, if it is based in reality. Because if it is, then sure, we can move on to talking about what it all means. But if it isn't, we can put it in the bin and just go on and discuss more interesting things like ranking all of Alan Cummings' outfits on the latest season of The Traitors. Spoiler alert, they're all S tier. Since the moment Guns, Germs, and Steel was published, the other pushback it received was from anthropologists and other scientists, the kindest of whom said that, while Diamond has some really interesting ideas, he ultimately fails to support them with hard data, and he ignores social elements of history that surely had as much, if not more, influence on how certain cultures developed compared to simple geographic luck. Other scientists weren't quite as even-handed. As an example, here's David Correa, who managed to publish an entire article in a peer-reviewed journal titled simply, "Fuck Jared Diamond," which opened, Jared Diamond is back at it, once again trading in the familiar determinist tropes that earned him a Pulitzer Prize for his book Guns, Germs, and Steel. That dull book was chock full of the bad and the worse, the random and the racist. At best, it is just silly, as when he offers unsupported and unsupportable assertions, such as his get off my lawn grouse that children today are not as smart as in the recent past and television is to blame. At worst, it develops an argument about human inequality based on a determinist logic that reduces social relations such as poverty, state violence, and persistent social domination to inexorable outcomes of geography and environment. Arguments such as these have made him a darling of bourgeois intellectuals who have grown tired of looking mean-spirited and self-serving when they make their transparently desperate efforts to displace histories of imperialism back on its victims. They need a pseudo-intellectual explanation for inequality in order to sustain the bourgeois social order that guarantees their privilege. This they found in Guns, Germs, and Steel. His crime spree continues with the 2012's The World Until Yesterday, What Can We Learn from Traditional Societies? That's right, that was just a drive-by excoriation of Guns, Germs, and Steel as an introduction to an excoriation of his most recent book at the time. Like, goddamn. Somewhere in the middle of those two extremes are the anthropologists who used to blog at Savage Minds, who published several thoughtful rebuttals to Diamond's hypotheses. For a good distillation on these arguments and many more, I recommend this article from Inside Higher Ed that links to a lot of great critiques. I tell you all of this to make it clear that almost immediately there was a lot of valid criticism of Diamond's book. And over the past 27 years, there hasn't been much to support his assertions. And the reason I'm talking about it all today is because a new study has just been published that directly tested that primary assertion. And the title gives away what they found. Geography is not destiny, a quantitative test of Diamond's axis of orientation hypothesis, published at the start of this year in Evolutionary Human Sciences. An international team of ecologists and cultural anthropologists examined a metric shit ton of cultural, environmental, and linguistic data to trace the spread of cultural traits across 1,094 mainland traditional societies in different geographic regions to try to nail down how much the geography of their locations influence them. And they actually found that geography really did impact the spread of certain traits like domesticated animals and subsistence types, agricultural intensity, and major crop type. Geography did not significantly matter when it came to many other cultural traits like sexual segregation of labor, games, and rituals. And the biggest takeaway was that despite geography impacting the spread of some cultural traits, the researchers found that the geography of Eurasia did not give the inhabitants any overall advantage compared to that found on other continents. They conclude that we have shown that although Diamond's intuition that ecological similarity facilitates cultural transmission is probably correct, these ecological effects are unlikely to be as influential as Diamond intuited. More so, we found no support for his argument that key areas of Eurasia are more ecologically homogeneous than comparable sites in other regions of the world. Our findings point out that latitude, like genetics and ecology, is not destiny. We echo earlier concerns about the perils of single-factor explanations and suggest that chance and perhaps factors that promoted colonial empires need to be more seriously considered as potentially important drivers of human inequality. In other words, beware the extremely popular science bestseller. It's frustrating that it seems like in order to publish a massive hit, scientists and science writers need to flush nuance down the toilet. No one wants to read about how geography has a very minor role in how cultures evolve. We want to read a mind-blowing fact that we can drop at a dinner party. Did you know that the only reason why the average American is better off than the average Nicaraguan is because of the plants that grew at 53 degrees latitude 10,000 years ago? Wow, fascinating. So nothing to do with Reagan secretly and illegally funding right-wing terrorist groups to overthrow a socialist government there? That is really cool. Excuse me, I need to go find the restroom to get away from you and throw up. Anyway, kudos to these researchers for performing a massive amount of data crunching to verify something that the experts have been saying for nearly 3 decades. You know, it's not a shocking result, but it is good science. And that beats a Pulitzer Prize winning bestseller any day. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.